can't decide whether to go audio or video for your first podcast or your next podcast episode, don't worry, I got you. Let's get this started. Shall we? Let's go. Hey folks, welcome back to Podmentorspace podcast where we help you take your podcast to the next level. And in this episode, I'm excited because I want to talk about this great debate. Of course, this debate will never end, but at least if I share my part of it, at least I'm helping someone make a decision with their podcast. Of course, the main topic is, of course, audio or video. But before we get into this episode, of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. If you are listening to this or watching this on Spotify, leave a follow button. And if you're listening to this elsewhere, I love you guys. So let's get into the meat and bones. Again, timestamps below. Don't forget it. Don't worry, I got you. So let's talk about this age-old question whether to go video or audio. Again, it's dependent on who you are and what your show is all about. But again, let's get into a deep dive. Let's put down all the pros and cons so that you get to have an interesting decision on whether or not to start with audio or video. Now, let's put it out. First, let's start with audio because it's A. Here are 3 pros that I listed down on my blog that let's talk about. One is it's easy to consume, less visual appealing, lower production costs. So, of course, easy to consume, we're looking at this from a listener's perspective. People can consume your podcast with ease. They can go out there and put your podcast on a speaker or on their phone and do 10 chores and then feed the kids, get the kids to school, put it in the car, or put it in their thing when they're going on a jogging or you're going out in a gym. So that's one pro that you want to consider. And of course, less visual appeal. Of course, it's a little bit hard to produce content, granted that you're only doing audio. But then the most that I can do in production that I remember doing earlier on was, of course, audiograms where you get the wavy stuff. Of course, I thought I spoke about that before. But yeah, you get doing audiograms is a form of marketing, getting your content out there. So it's a less visual appealing kind of medium. And of course, lower production costs. It only takes you to have a software which is free like Audacity and a mic. You don't even need a video. So it's just those two things. And yeah, those are the pros. And of course, here are the cons. There are 2 cons. It's difficult to brand and limited reach and engagement. The difficult to brand is, of course, granted that your listeners are, if your listeners like a visual content, of course, it's very hard for them to picture you in front of a podcast mic. So it's very hard for them to identify you with the podcast itself. And in terms of limited reach and engagement, of course, if they can't see you, how will they engage with your content, especially when you're marketing your content on social media? So yeah, it's really hard. But yeah, pros and cons. The best example that I can think of at the moment, spur of the moment, that I wrote here is one is this series called Faking Michael. If you guys are a huge Michael Jackson fan, this podcast was circulating recently when I joined when I was talking about this. Apparently, I don't want to get into the detail of it, but the concept of Faking Michael is a series of investigative journalists who went down this rabbit hole of investigating and figuring out why the record company started producing fake music that wasn't even Michael Jackson stuff. And it really gets down to the nitty gritty. You have audio interviews and all this stuff. And it's well put, well researched, the production wise. it's an amazing piece of art, basically, because the way I was consuming this when I was working out, because I was really intrigued, and I think I was in 3 or 4 episodes deep. It's an amazing episode that you guys gotta check out. This is one example of an amazing audio podcast. Of course, it banked on a niche, and it banked on an interest, and it just built. That's how it built its own audience through audio. If you think that you can't build an audience on audio, this is an example. Faking Michael. I'll put the list and link below, especially on Spotify and on YouTube. So now let's talk about video. So video, of course, let's just get straight into the pros. Is there are three: high reach, high engagement, more visual appealing, easy to brand. Let's start with easy to brand. Of course, it's easy for people to identify you with your brand if you're talking about it and you're always going video. So that is how it is easy to brand. It's opposite than on audio. Of course, more visual appeal, because of course they can see you on a daily basis. So if you're taking an interview with someone, of course they can see you, so they can feel like they can relate. And high reach and high engagements, of course, we all know, on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube Shorts, all these short clips of people being interviewed are going viral, of course, except the main video itself. For some loyal listeners who listen to 3 hours of the entire thing, of course there's a con there somewhere that I'm going to talk about later. But yeah, it's easy for people to it's easy for people to gain the attention of the podcaster, especially if the topic is controversial, in terms of the short clips, 60 seconds, 30 seconds, all that stuff. But yeah, that's how you can get reach and engagement on saying. That's one pro. And then of course, three cons that I actually thought about is high production costs, production complexity, and time-consuming consumption. Of course, let's talk about consumption-wise. If a listener is a big fan of you, and of course they want to be a part of, they want to listen to the full context, they have to sit down and literally watch this like a Netflix documentation. That's how it is. Um, and that's how impactful a full episode is when it comes to video, when you're going hours and end. So yeah, it takes time to consume. And yeah, and now let's go up to that. Is production complexity, dependent on how you produce your content, how your workflow is. It's really dependent on that your production would suffer. Meaning to say that over time, of course, it's gonna get harder and harder if you're doing it always, and you are the one who's doing this, and you're not taking AI tools. So you have to do a lot of stuff in the production of a video production or a podcast production. You have to consider these three things. You have to consider pre-production, production, and post-production. And in each category, you have a lot of things going on. So if you're an informative podcast, you have to consider research. You have to go fact check. If you're a history or news, you have to fact check, and you have to do a lot of things. You have to consider all of that in pre-production alone. That will consume energy. And then of course, when you're in production, of course you'll be on the front of the mic, so you have to make sure that you look appealing, which is contradicting to what I do, because I'm not a fancy looking alpha male. But yeah, it's all about mental state when you're producing. And then in post production, of course, post production, getting the video out there, marketing it, putting it into short clips, and then getting that content out there. So those are the complexities that you have to consider. And in audio, it's much more easier, because pre-production you can research, production you can just spit in front of a mic, and then post-production, get it out there. It's mostly production and post-production that gets a lot of the work, but here you have to have pre-production, again dependent on what your niche is. And high production costs. This mic that I'm using right now is an investment that I made for myself when I started developing my show. This headphones, same thing. This phone that I'm looking at, same thing. This laptop that I'm looking at my script for, it is all investment. So there's a lot of things that you have to consider when you're getting into podcasting. You got to invest, and you got to invest slowly, slow budget, and then the more that you're working, earning, putting things together, improve your quality of content will improve over time. So that's the con. And the best example that I can think of for a video production that's successful is, of course, none other than Joe Rogan Experience. Joe Rogan Experience has a lot of episodes, and majority even on Spotify is video. So there are some YouTube clips, short clips. There, I do believe there are some short clips that are from YouTube. I don't really know how the production, the post production is, but I noticed that there are some short clips there. So I don't know if it's full clip, but on Spotify, 3-4 hours of content. His team is amazing. I got a shout out to their team. So yeah, that's how a successful podcast is for both. Uh, f- if you're considering uh, adding a little bit complexity to what you already have, this is one thing that you might consider, which is a hybrid approach of doing both audio and video. So, of course, let's just get straight into it. Pros, of course, more creative outlet, broader reach, improve odds of accessibility. So of course, having a creative output, this is more on your side as a podcaster, as a creator. You have a lot of mediums where you can experiment on what you want to do. So if you choose to do an audio for one particular episode because you are feeling sick, you can do that. Or if you want to do video, you've been doing audio all, and you want to do a video for one particular, let's say an interview, a live cast interview, go by all means. So it's creative. It's all about putting things together. Here you can have a broader reach of two types of audience: visual and listening type of audience. So if your audience is a visual audience, but you've been releasing audio, of course switching will not make it much harder because now they have something to base it off. And then if you are the opposite, if you create a lot of video and you want to create an audio, so it's broader reach. You get two types of audience from that thing. And then improve odds of accessibility. So if, let's say, like I said before, if you've been doing video and then you suddenly decide to switch, and then your audience start enjoying the audio type of content, then your odds of having a loyal listener is up. It's gonna go up. So that's how you can increase your chances of winning in terms of gaining a right type of audience. So yeah, but of course there's always a con to saying this hybrid approach. uh, Three, of course, overwhelming options for your audience, complicated workflows, and you must need storage. Must need storage is a need for everybody, I guess. You gotta invest in your storage because um, 15 GB of personal Google Drive cannot really cut it, especially when you're doing a lot of massive video and audio. So you gotta put in at least 1 terabyte or 12 terabyte, and of course you gotta keep paying that either OneDrive or G Drive or hard drive, either or. As long as you have something good going, just keep going. That's where my advice goes for storage. Complicated workflows. If you've developed a workflow for your video, of course switching to audio would be a little bit more challenging because you have to develop a workflow. If you have a team, you have to re-educate them. Or if you have a team and you've been doing video and then you decide to switch, of course you have to develop a workflow for your team to transition into, or vice versa, going from audio to video. And then overwhelming options for your audience. This is kind of clear because if your audience is only purist, they listen, and then you decide to go video, you have to inform them, I guess, that you're trying this for this particular episode. So I guess the third point is not really complicated because as long as you can inform your listener or gain, you have a chance of gaining more audiences from listeners who are accustomed to the type of ways that they consume content. So the third one is less complicated than the storage and complicated workflows. In conclusion, my friend, here is where the conclusion is. It is up to you. I am just giving you a bird's eye view of what video and audio offers to you as a content creator. The decision is up to you. The debate, if you're still stuck in the debate, um, this will give you a clarity of having either audio or video to give you a visuals of what you really want to do and how you want to achieve that. So these are certain things to conclude this episode. Is these are three things that you should consider that in order for you to figure out where you want to be in your podcast journey. One is, what is your podcast vision? What's your short term vision? What's your long term vision? Do you want to be the next Joe Rogan? Go video. If you want to be the next research like Faking Michael, the research guys who did Faking, the media guys who did Faking Michael, then go audio. But stick to that vision. It's okay to experiment, but don't overcomplicate it. Just stick to one medium and just keep going. Know your target audience, know who you're speaking to, how do they consume. So this is based on the content that you've been releasing. So you have to understand how will they relate and how can it be easier for you. But you have to think about it. You have to think about it, and you have to create a content, a database. This is where marketing comes into play. And then above everything else that I've said, it's all about quality. Quality and quality. You, whether you're doing video or audio, you have to always consider quality. You will never win with shitty quality. I'm sorry, but that's how it is. I've had shitty quality content, but then over time, I had faith and I kept going with my content creation. That's how I kept winning. So I hope these few tips helped you and gave you a bird's eye view of what you want to do. And if you have questions, put them in the comment section below. And of course, as usual, I will leave my own questions on YouTube, and I'll be resending them the next week after this episode's released. So with that in mind, cheers, folks, and I hope I saved a life. Cheers.